Hello, everybody. My name is Ben, and my hometown's been making some pretty big news lately, for the first time in my personal memory, anyways. And I mean, some of you have probably seen it, but Meta is building a $13 billion, 1 gigawatt data center in Sturgeon County, Alberta, Canada, baby. My beautiful home county. It will be the largest in Western Canada, at least for now, and has a projected end construction date of 1 year from now. Shout out to PCL Dog. They managed to drain public coffers dry on literally any other project, but the second it's like the Environment Decimator 9000, they got that shit built in like a month. It's ridiculous. But I digress. The fact that this thing is getting built at all is a failure of our municipal government for sure, but they should be our last line of defense. There's been failures all along the chain working their way down from federal. Like, for example, Mark Carney's Liberals and their new AI for all strategy is just throwing the doors wide open. They want as much AI investment as possible. So, of course, we're going to end up with some, right? But he's pretty small beans compared to the worst of the worst, the United Conservative Party, who have just flung the doors wide open for these fucking companies to come in and just like do whatever they want. The UCP not only fast tracks applications for construction, but they also have a concierge team of sorts that welcomes new AI investors and developers. They also maintain one of the only unregulated power grids in the entire country, which is increasingly becoming an appealing investment proposition for AI developers and software companies. The energy grid is actually incredibly important to these companies, right? Because obviously their whole business relies on power. And historically, these have been built in provinces with a clean energy or a lower emissions energy grid, I should say, like Quebec, Ontario, New Brunswick, and BC. And that's where the current 5 hyperscale or giant data centers are located that are currently operating in Canada. Now, these provinces had cheaper power, for one thing, because they rely more heavily on renewables, which are increasingly becoming more economically viable than traditional fossil fuels like we use a lot here in Alberta. But they've also begun to regulate their power grids and block connections to the grid for some of these larger projects, which obviously is problematic if you want to suck up, say, the energy consumption of an entire city. So naturally, they look for somewhere that doesn't have a regulated power grid. And wouldn't you know it, Alberta is waiting with open arms. And that's part of the reason why, if ratios for development continue the way they are, and if, I mean, not obviously not all projects currently in development will get built, but if they do, 90% of data center capacity will be located in Alberta. And that's why, as Albertans, it's incredibly important that we fight back against these projects because we can make an example out of all of them, right? Polling shows this is a 70-15 issue. There's a few people who are undecided still, but the vast majority of people, because they like to breathe air, drink water, and eat food, are against this because it's literally anti-human. It's anti-human infrastructure. And honestly, it's beautiful how it's bringing people together. Like socialists, liberals, conservatives, all of them are in complete agreement that Mark Zuckerberg is a freak and we don't want any part in his little game. And the broad opposition just makes the fact that our politicians do not give one flying fuck about any of our opinions even more clear. Like, there are a few exceptions, like Heather McPherson, the MP for Edmonton Strathcona, is fantastic. She's like a champion for the anti-AI movement in the House of Commons. Shout out to her. Honestly, I had my reservations about her, but after listening to her speak and seeing what she does, she would have been a fantastic leader. Either way, it's very obvious that these politicians know that we don't like data centers because they feel the need to sell us on every single project that they do, right? They say stuff like, oh, it'll only use as much water as a golf course. It's closed loop cooling system. It's not going to be loud. We have special quietness technology that will keep it from deafening you and making you want to kill yourself. We're bringing our own power generation. And just think of how much money it's going to make. Oh my God, how exciting. I'm salivating at the thought of all the money that's not going to enter my fucking pocket because it's getting hoovered up and sent to some American, like, asswipe. And of course, it's nice to imagine that they've found a way to not melt the planet with AI, but the reality is that we have a lot of living examples of what happens when a data center enters an area. Like, if especially if we look to the United States, we've seen loss of water pressure, rare bacteria, deafening noise, increased suicide rates, higher power costs, and all of this in spite of corporate promises that none of these will happen. Like, we can already see very foreseeable consequences of the Sturgeon County project, even though they've come out saying all this stuff to make us feel better about it. Like, if there's one thing for certain, it's that companies love to lie, and the government is terrible, at least in its current form, at holding them to their promises. It's no coincidence that they've built the Sturgeon County one, or that they will be building the Sturgeon County one, in an industrial park, so they didn't have to go through any kind of public consultation on its construction. And I already hear you saying, well, if it's in an industrial park, then it can't be that damaging, right? Like, it's not going to affect us as much as if it was in, you know, the middle of the city of Edmonton. It's like, that's true. Okay. Like, granted, yes, it is. If there is one place for it to be, it should probably be in an industrial park. I mean, for one thing, these are incredibly unpopular. These should always go to public consultation. But I don't know if everyone is, on the same page about this, but water and power get distributed to everyone, not just to urban centers or to people's houses, right? So when you have something that's going to hoover up all of it, like, this is a 1 gigawatt data center. For reference, the city of Calgary uses roughly 1.01 gigawatts, I think is what it was. This thing is going to be in our backyard. And you know how they've been saying, I mean, maybe you don't know, but they've been saying that it will be bringing its own power generation. That the power plant that's going to go with it won't be done until multiple years after the completion of the rest of the data center. So everything will be online, connected to the grid, drawing power, the equivalent of one of Alberta's major cities, to do, like, absolutely fucking nothing. And if anybody thinks that that's not going to drive up electricity costs across the entire province, then they're an idiot, because it absolutely will. That kind of additional strain on the grid, our grid is already almost at capacity. Like, they don't have room for major projects like this, which is doubly important in a ruralized community because we already have sort of very common brownouts. Like, lots of people that I know in our community already suffer from this. Adding strain to the grid is not going to fix this. This is just an objectively bad thing. And we're only at the power costs and generation, right? There are so many other factors with a data center. Like, okay, say we tough it out until the power comes on, like the natural gas power plant gets fully finished and it's generating power, it's easing off the grid. First of all, our electrical companies are not regulated again, and they will not lower prices. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Like, half of inflation during COVID was artificial because they could charge more. The price of stuff never goes down, it only goes up. And that's only the beginning, because the power plant will be requiring 1.25 million liters of water a day, which during peak usage times is enough to dry up the line and literally cause water loss for other parts of the county. It's ridiculous. Like this data center uses the same amount of water as the entire rest of Sturgeon County does. And believe it or not, they can't bring that volume of water with them. So there is no getting around that problem, regardless of if they don't use water for cooling inside the data center. They're always going to need water for power generation unless they do renewables. And so another big concern with data centers is the sound that they produce, right? Like if you've ever heard a recording of it or seen a video of a neighborhood where these data centers are, it's just like deafening. And that's part of why suicide rates increase when they're put into communities. But it's in an industrial park, right? Like that doesn't really affect us. And that's true. I mean, it'll obviously affect anybody who's living around that area, but it's not as impactful, let's say, to us, to humans. But the sound that they produce is actually incredibly disruptive to wildlife, and especially, and most importantly, in this case, anyways, bees, because I feel like I don't need to remind everybody that Sturgeon County is a largely agricultural community that relies on, the natural environment to produce a lot of people's livelihoods. So I feel like moving the bee decimator 9,000 into the neighborhood is probably not ideal because bees, to remind our viewers at home, are the things that pollinate other plants so that we can eat. And speaking of people's livelihoods, that kind of brings me to my next point, which is the theoretical job growth and production or revenues of this data center once it's fully constructed. And so I think it was something like there's a couple thousand construction jobs that would be created. But then once it's fully constructed, there's 300 permanent jobs. Again, that's theoretically. Of course, they will likely find ways to cut down on staff because that's one of their major expenses. And these jobs are by no means high quality either. They're very low paying, they are difficult, it's a hot work environment, it's very loud, it's just an unpleasant place to be. And Danielle Smith is saying that we'll also get $250 million annually from somewhere, right? Something relating to this project will generate $250 million annually. I mean, I'm sure that if you're talking GDP, yes, it will probably generate that because of just the sheer amount of water being consumed and how much everybody else's power bills are going to go up. So nominal GDP will probably increase by that much. But I mean, first and foremost, let's talk tax revenues. If we're talking about revenue, um, the province has disallowed taxing the value of the inside of the building, so they're only taxing the land, and that is just making very little tax revenue. So we've got an environmental disaster that's going to just spread misery and increase costs of living for everyone, and it's going to generate very little tax revenue. And it's also going to be used to train AI. Now, what are they training it for? Well, increasingly, they're training it to replace your job. If you're an office worker, if you're an artist, if you're even a lawyer or a doctor, you aren't safe. Even physical jobs like factory labor are steadily being consumed by AI as robotics progresses alongside it, right? No matter what, AI is probably going to come for your job eventually, right? It could be really far down the line. Hopefully, we can prevent it from doing that by then. Or maybe by then we'll actually benefit from AI taking over labor jobs, right? The job losses of AI are devastating. And a lot of the companies that are making these AI models are laying off their own employees as a result, right? So the 300 jobs created by this data center are nothing compared to the losses of jobs that are created by AI. It's just, it doesn't even come close to balancing out. We're increasingly losing jobs to AI at a time where unemployment is at like record critical levels, especially for young people. Me and my generation are most personally affected by this. This is devastating to us and our futures. Environmental consequences aside, even. There's just absolutely no upside to this. And as Albertans, we are actually uniquely positioned to fight this and make an example out of this, right? We have the power to show the rest of the country and these companies that they can't just come here and do whatever they want to us. We won't take it lying down. No matter your political affiliation, we need to fight this. We need to fight constructions. We need to make sure that anyone who backs these projects never wins an election ever again. We need to show them that this is our home and we'd like to keep living in it. If we stand together, they can't just walk all over us. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.